So, Abdullah, welcome to the Footy Circus show, where we explore the culture of football and challenge our perception to the game. And our topic today that we've invited you for is football clubs' brand narratives. Yes, thank you for joining us, and please introduce yourself.
I'm very honored to be here today. I see the work you're doing, and I've always supported the initiative. So I'm very glad to be directly contributing to that cause. So my name is Abdulla Aluqahwi. I don't like to speak about myself, but
Please do.
I'm a football coach. Currently, I work with Bahrain under-19 football national team as a team analyst. So I analyze the team, I analyze opponents, and I help the development of the players. I'm also a founder of, or co-founder of Everyone's Game, which is a social, let's say, it's a sports social organization that helps promote social aspects using football as a tool to drive social change. So we work especially with young females and with kids with special needs, such as Down syndrome, using our methodology to encourage them, empower themselves to be better humans. So I also like to read a lot about football and challenge myself to use football not just as a coach. I don't like to put myself in a box. I don't like to. It's pretty much like what you're always trying to say or to do, change people's point of view about the game. But it's not particularly about the format. To me, it's more about why is football important to our existence, and why is it? Why we should not feel so. Yeah, why we should.
Why is it important to our existence? I like that.
It sounds like a big statement, but I don't want to apologize about practicing football in times when people look at it like just as if it was just a simple game or it's just a sport or entertainment. I want to challenge that narrative, and I want to show them that it's actually something that is deeply connected to our well-being, our mental well-being, our physical well-being, our social well-being. So there are far more dimensions to football than what we give credit to.
Absolutely.
I'm here today to challenge that with you.
Explore that.
Yeah. Explore.
I wanted to add why you are special to me with football, and it's because you are the guy who spoke about football in ways that I haven't heard before. And you spoke about it from a sociological and psychological perspective, and you were able to tell me why I stopped playing. And that was very important to me, that you were able to answer that question. And so the topic we're exploring today is within these themes, sociological, psychological, and the topic is football clubs' brand narratives. So two conversations of ours inspired this. One was about the game, money in football, and the teams that are able to make it from a financial point of view. And then there was another conversation which was about creating a narrative for the Women's World Cup. And you were promoting that on Everyone's Game Instagram. And yeah, you just shed light on the importance of storytelling. And I mean, that's why you and I watch a show, because rather we watch episode 7 of season 2, because we understand what happened before. And so we need to know what's going on. And that inspired the questions coming up, which is we want to explore the teams that are able to make it not from a financial point of view, but from a brand and historical narrative point of view. And why some teams are able to do this so well, why some teams with a shorter history like Barcelona are able to have the following that they do. So can we explore the teams that do this well?
So, first of all, I want to answer you about the point you or the question you started with about the women's game and my personal decision to promote storytelling in order for me to promote the women's game. So one thing I learned from my um, research and from my time when I was learning to be a coach, and I'm still learning, but when I was studying throughout these past years, it's an area where I want to specialize in, which is cross learning. So a lot of what I know about football did not come from the football world, but it came from different domains. And I'll just give you one example to clarify what I mean. Currently, I'm studying jazz music. Not because I've been following jazz music for so long, but just because jazz music for me is so interesting. It's so popular that you barely ever hear anyone says that I hate jazz. You might not hear them say I like jazz, but they don't say I hate it because it's very friendly for everyone. The thing about jazz is that it embodies everything that we want in the football world. It's systematic chaos. It's a set of talented individuals that are working together to come up with one single harmony to please crowds. And this harmony is the pillar of this harmony is the human aspects, such as individual brilliance, where everyone's trying to play the best instrument they can play in the best form they can. And then the others trying to adapt to their solos or their because everyone just improvises in jazz. And the others have to adapt to that rhythm and that tempo and try to match it up to make it sound like something beautiful. And then empathy, where everyone has to understand what's the other coming from, where's the other coming from, and what are they trying to establish, respect, everything you want about team sports, especially football, because it's organized chaos. It's there in jazz. So if you are trying to study football or any other sport just from the domain itself, then I'm not gonna say you're doing it wrong, but I'm gonna say you're limiting yourself.
Yeah.
So this guides me to the area of women's game. The women's game, I'm one of the biggest advocates you can meet about the women's game. But the mistake that people commit is that they try to get themselves into debates, and debates don't win you anything. On contrary, I think if you start a debate about the women's game with someone that does not believe in it, it will push them far away, even further than they were. And the opposite is true. So instead of comparing, because it's not fair for anyone or to anyone,
exactly,
I would say just try to look at it from as a different form of the game. And for example, I always tell people that wants to study football analysis to watch the football games that women's play, because it's much more structured and it's slower for you to understand the systems, the patterns. So it's nothing. Being slow is not being wrong or not being less. Being slow is a feature that they have to capitalize on. So instead of looking at the men's game and trying to demand similar treatment, similar salaries, it's not fair. It's a different domain. You spoke about it in one of your episodes, and it makes a lot of sense that it's a different industry. And the men's game, TV rights dictates everything. And that's the thing. That's the harsh reality. So unless we can generate similar crowds, then we can demand to have similar exposure. And people are not going to be attracted if we're trying to copy what the men's are doing. If we want to promote a healthy women's game platform, we have to capitalize on our own narrative. So when I was trying to promote the Women's World Cup, I realized something, that life is a storytelling, and football is a form of storytelling as well. It's like when you're randomly sitting here and you get a text from your friend that says, watch this, Game of Thrones. Just watch it. It's really fun. Today is season 7, episode 6. Just put it on and enjoy. If you try to put it on, you're not going to enjoy it because you don't know who's who. So you need some insight. You need some context. And without this context, everything is just bizarre. Like, I don't get why this guy is so good or this guy is so bad or who's the king, who's the whatever. So you need this script, and the script is what guides you to a better understanding of the product that is in front of you. So if I went out there and I told people, please watch the women's game, I'm sure that the majority of people don't follow these players. They don't even know they exist. If I tell them who's the champion of last year's Champions League, no one would get it. Barely anyone would. Even some women that play football.
Yeah.
So I wanted this honest approach.
I'm going to keep quiet.
Yeah, I'm not going to put you under the gun. So
thanks.
I wanted to, shed some light. I wanted to build some healthy understanding of the narrative here. So this storytelling, I wanted to showcase the story. And if they got the story, then it might help them understand who's who. So when you put on any football game or any different sports, when you see two teams playing and you don't know anything about them, the first thing that you try to discover is who's supposed to win. Because you want to cheer for the other guy, most probably. Unless you're someone, I don't know how you think you're going to root for the dominant force, but everyone more or less will try to look for the underdog.
I wonder why we naturally have the support for the underdog. It's almost, I guess, trying to equalize the forces, because you said dominant force. So I was thinking equalizing of forces, but that's, I think, for another time.
Yeah, it's a complete different conversation, but I'm going to touch upon it later on as well. So I wanted to build that narrative. I wanted to tell people, okay, listen, you might know that USA is the dominant force, but you might have to revise that because it hasn't been the same, or it's not what you think, or they're not as good as you think. Lots of people got shocked when they started to watch the World Cup and they saw what happened to the USA when they played with Spain. And Spain is one of the shortest living football national teams in the world. And they lost, I think, through two penalties or something like that. But it was a very tight game. So my point is, we started to put on some content on our social media platform. I started to analyze teams. I started to highlight their key players potential, players that can excite you, who's the most experienced team, blah, blah, blah. And with that, I started to give out some handouts about the script of the Women's World Cup. I'm not sure if it helped or not, but it's something that I experimented with. And if I had bigger audiences, I probably could have achieved something better, but we were just barely starting back then. So that leads me to the second question. So now that we understood how storytelling is important for sports in general, for us supporting a team and rooting for a team then why some clubs do it so well? I'll start with the word history. You mentioned Barcelona and the short history they have. I want to rephrase that. They have a short trophy-based history, but they have very rich history. And if you think about it this way, you flip a switch because every single...
How do they flip that switch? Because if you're a team that's not used to winning, how do you tell your fans that, yes, that's going to change and we're going to start winning? Okay, so here it goes. Every single football organization, when I say football, I can also say sports, but football is just so much more special. So I'm just going to talk about football for now. And believe me, it has a different factors. So I'm going to stick to football. So every single football club in the world has its own narrative.
whether it's by design or by accident.
Yes.
And why do people, how do clubs convince people to stick to them or to support them from the start? Is because football organization has a unique feature, which is customer loyalty. No, you can barely ever hear about a football fan that changed their football support because of a trophy. So the moral of the story here is this: no matter how badly you run your organization as a football club, you're almost certain to never lose your crowd. It's just there.
Yeah.
The worst case scenario, I understand some people can do that. To me, I've never met someone that does that, but there probably are people like that. But the worst thing that can happen to you realistically is for people to hate the current board, but they don't hate the brand.
Yes.
So from here, we go to the question, so why do people support their clubs to begin with? You might think that trophies is one of the most leading and probably is reasons of why people choose to support clubs, but I'm going to argue against that. I think the narrative is what makes you choose what team to root for.
Absolutely.
And the narrative here is, what kind of football club are you supporting? What do they stand for? Why do they exist? How did they exist? And how are they practicing their day-to-day operation? So let's just use Barcelona, for example. I'm actually going to do something different. So you support Juve, yeah?
Yes, I do.
Why do you support Juve?
Well, at the time when we were introduced to Juventus, we were in Italy, and we were told about these two fantastic strikers who were Del Piero and Inzaghi. And we watched the games, my brother, my sister, and I. And they were supposedly, the club with the most cups. We had that void to fill in our hearts, if you will, with a football club. And so we picked the one that we felt was perhaps, not necessarily recommended to us, but it was shared with us, and we liked the story of the two strikers, and it stuck.
There it goes. So there's my answer. You said story, but you haven't said trophy, or probably said something Cubs or something, but it was
They were winners. We knew that this was a club that wins. So we adopted a club that we were like, okay, so we know these guys will deliver.
Okay, this is
But this is also me analyzing from my 29-year-old self.
Yeah, I know.
That 7-year-old child who had no idea why she was picking Juventus.
But the thing is, you probably wouldn't have supported them if they were winners but had a bad story or a bad public image or whatever, because it might attract you that they're winning, but if they do it in a horrible way, let's say it's a club that don't care about its people, or it's a club that mistreats their fans, you wouldn't be attracted, even if you were the most successful team.
Absolutely.
The thing that makes people stick is the narrative and the story. So every single person has this exact story. Every single person decided to support this team because of an incident, or because of a moment, or because of something. Even if they supported them because they won something, and they just watched this game and this team won, so I decided to follow them. If they realized when they got the context that this is the wrong team to support for whatever reason, they might not stick with it, because the basis of it was not something rational. It was just, I saw them win, so I decided to support them. But it rarely ever happens, because every single football club has a story, and this story is attractive. So why do clubs make it and why some others make it better than the others, because some football directors capitalize on that. And I'm going to give you an example of Barcelona, since you asked about Barcelona. So Barcelona has a long history. Barcelona represents Catalonia, and Catalonia as a region has a long history in Spain as being the underdog. So it's a region that fights against, you know, injustice, and it's they take a lot of pride in what they stand for and what they represent. So there is a big following within that region to the club, because the club basically embodies the idea of Catalonia. So although Barcelona were not successful for a lot of years, or many years, they started to really be out there when they, particularly, I mean, you associate Barcelona with that era more than any other era, because of Cruyff. And in Cruyff, they brought in somebody that represents everything that Catalonia as an ideology stands for. Cruyff was an outspoken rebellion individual. Was very famous in Holland for leading protest as much as being good at what he does. So when Cruyff came in, he started to be out there. He started to be the presence of FC Barcelona, and then he started to promote the kind of football that he has always respected. So on that foundation, he started to advocate for more or less the beautiful kind of football, the more progressive, the more attractive, the total football that the Dutch football was famous for. And the club embraced that. And they believe it or not, there was a time at Barcelona where there was a door at the academy that says if you are under, for example, 160 centimeters, you're not allowed to come into the academy, or something like that. So there was the rule for players that if you're less than this exact height, then you cannot make it here. So Cruyff changed that. Cruyff gave everyone an opportunity to represent the club, and he built that on a technically sound foundation. So that's why Barcelona is now more or less seen as the Cruyff, let's say the Cruyffian church.
Yes.
So everyone sees it as that this is a church and it belongs to Cruyff. But post Cruyff, the club lost a lot, and they suffered, especially in the late 90s and the beginning of the 2000s. The club was in an identity crisis because Cruyff left, and the club started to try to catch up with the others, such as Madrid, and they wanted to be more, so they started to do more. So they abandoned their principles, and they started to go into an area where they're not comfortable with, and their fans are not comfortable with. So
how did that happen? What does that look like?
It was a mess. They weren't winning. Lots of players were dictating how the club was being run. In Spain, there's this famous word for the youth academies, which is la cantera. So the cantera of the club was the Masia, was the main feeder to the first team. But they started to abandon that, and they were trying to copy what Real Madrid was doing. But this is not your narrative. You know, your narrative is different. Madrid's narrative has always been that. So they're good at that. And this is the risk of you losing your fandom, because they believe in you because you are the underdog. Don't try to be the dominator. Don't try to be the biggest force, or the big brother, if you will. So
can I paint the picture here of Real Madrid a little bit? So they were the team where all the best players went. So you don't want to compete with that brand as
Because
being the club where all the best players go. You want to come at it from
you can attract them, but you can use them in a different way. And that way is built on your narrative. So instead of outspending Real Madrid, because it will almost never happen,
yes,
try to beat them with your own way, because your unique way belongs only to you. No one else can replicate that.
Yeah.
So when they tried to copy what the others are doing, the club was in a mess. Until Juan Laporta came in. And Juan Laporta was the president of Barcelona, the Barcelona that we know right now, the 2008-7 Barcelona. And one of the main things that he's done to the club was to actually stop the appointment of Jose Mourinho, because he was almost this close to be the new Barcelona manager, because they thought in order for them to win, they had to bring in somebody with experience and with know-how to put them on the map again. Even though Rijkaard was successful, he got the Champions League with them, but they wanted, when Rijkaard dipped again, they wanted to have another peak again. So they sat down with Jose Mourinho and he showed them his methodology and everything. But then Juan Laporta came in and he pulled the plug, because Jose Mourinho might be a winner, but he does not represent what we believe in and what we stand for as a football club organization.
Yes.
So here was the turning point, because Laporta hired...
That's very brave.
Yeah, it was. Believe me, it's so easier said than done. Imagine you as maybe somebody... Maybe you're not even known for a lot of fans. You're just a president that just came in, and you start your era by challenging the idea of bringing in a proven successful manager, and then betting everything you have on somebody that made it as a football player, but that is barely has any experience in managing a football club, which is Pep Guardiola. So believe it or not, Pep Guardiola was brought in not even as much. Pep Guardiola was brought in because of his story, because of the narrative, how he fits into that puzzle, way more than his technical or tactical understanding. We all know how it turned out and how well he is now, how good he is now. But when they brought him in, it was more of a cultural fit than a technical sound manager. And the reason why Laporta brought him in was that he was helped by two main dictators, or not dictators, two main, I would say, leaders that are working so well behind the scenes. And a lot of football fans don't even know them. Which is Soriano and Chiki. So Soriano and Chiki are football directors that are now working with Manchester City, and they brought in Pep to City now. They used to work with FC Barcelona, and they did a lot of research on how to build a high performance culture in football clubs. And they went to Silicon Valley and they conducted some research and some interviewing. And then they came in with this idea of building a commitment culture, and they made Pep Guardiola as the authentic leader to guide this culture, because he embodies everything that we believe in.
So if you want to bring this culture into your football club, part of it is also bringing in this coach who will help implement this culture.
Because without authentic leadership, you can never sustain high performance. So if you notice it, when they came in, they had one aspect, one bigger picture to push for, which is to promote what we stand for as a football club, which is positivity, progressive technical, quick tempo-based football brand. So they started with bringing a coach that believes in this ideology. Then they started to promote people from La Masia, young players, to the first team. And then they started to do this beyond the pitch as well. If you notice that era, that's something really interesting. Look at the sponsorship list of Barcelona back then. It was UNICEF, it was Qatar Foundation, because they wanted to put an idea in your head. Whenever you hear Barcelona, you associate this brand with positivity and positive things. So we don't want to use a corporate logo. We want to use something that represents goodwill. UNICEF was part. So we have a cause even when we're using sponsorship packages. They started to promote aggressively the motto of the club, which is Mesquite Club. That's a famous line given in a speech by a club president in 1968, I think. So they embraced that. And then,
so interesting.
Yeah, you asked me why do people follow Barcelona? It's because when you switch on TV and you don't even know football, or you're so young, you see one football club that plays in a very exciting way, regardless of the score, and then they win you over. And then you have good football, good public image, good people, and a good culture. So in a way, Barcelona became this positive brand, and it's sitting there no matter what happens right now. Even though it's been run so poorly in the past few years, the club still maintains this depth that this is a club that represents such and such and such. So the brilliant thing that Barcelona did was that they have embraced who they were and who they are, instead of trying to shut their eyes down away from their history. Instead of saying, we actually were successful. No, they said, we weren't winning a lot of trophies, but we had a story, and we want to embrace that story because what matters is now. And right now, they are up there with the best organizations in the world. So this is just one example. I know it took me so long, but believe me, the story is so much bigger than what I
Absolutely. This actually reminds me of Juventus. This is an easy team for me to speak about because obviously I follow this team and I've seen their ups and downs, and they've had a recent change in trying to perceive themselves less as a football club and more as a brand. And this is a bit different than what we've been talking about, because we were talking with you in regards to Barcelona about how a team is able to be successful on the field using the narrative. Whereas here I'm talking about Juventus trying to appeal to a larger audience in today's age. Hence the Palace Adidas Juventus jersey. So what they did was they rebranded, obviously, their logo. I really dislike it, actually. But they started to do a bunch different things, which it seems like it's a little bit awkward now in the beginning. I think they're still trying to find their footing with this. But Bonucci, for example, put out a playlist, like a warm-up playlist, and they would hold these little parties. And I see what they were trying to do with the brand. And then as a result, given that they were trying to attract a larger audience, they realized they need to change their game. Now, they have an inner struggle here because their quote is, winning isn't what's important, it's the only thing that matters. So now Juventus have to challenge this value statement. And they've been winning. The reason why they have to challenge this is because they've been winning ugly sometimes. And to appeal to a larger audience, you need to be beautiful. And Napoli did that very well. So they had to decide to bring in this was a controversial step for them to bring in Sarri to coach Juventus. And everyone's extremely skeptical because the guy isn't reliable when it comes to winning.
Yeah.
Not at all, but he produces the most beautiful game that I've watched in the modern game. There was Barcelona for some time, but not in the way Napoli played in the past couple of years. Obviously, it's going to take time for it to settle in with Juventus. But that was a different brand decision, actually opposing their brand because they're rebranding.
Yeah.
They're going to have to come up with a new statement for themselves. Winning beautiful is the only thing that matters.
Now it's not, apparently. Yeah, what you said brought me to something. There's a German coach and director and technical director. For me, he is probably the person that I look up for the most in the football world, just because of he excels in so many areas in football. As a director, so his name is Ralf Rangnick. He is a German coach, and he is the person that established Hoffenheim as a major force in Germany today. He's a football director and a technical director. He's also now supervising the Red Bull Group clubs. So
interesting.
Work and Red Bull Leipzig and Red Bull New York, Red Bull or Red Bull New York.
Yes. Yes.
But he sets the benchmark for me in entity development in football, because he understands that so much, but he is also phenomenal tactically and technically. He's up there with the best.
Okay.
I mean, Red Bull Salzburg now, lots of the young, exciting talents in the football world right now came in from that club. I mean, Erling Haaland is the latest one. Well, you had Sadio Mane, you had Naby Keita, you had so much Timo Werner. Timo Werner actually wasn't. But you had so many young talents that came in from that club, because that club had a specific identity, and it was based on gegenpressing, which is counter-pressing. It's this German idea. And so every single decision he makes it
gegenpressing.
Yeah, it's this buzzword in football right now, which basically means counter-pressing. And he was one of the people that pioneered this term. So there's this brilliant talk for Ralf Rangnick. It's on YouTube. It's the only one in English, I think. The rest is in German, so it forces me to learn German in a way. So there's this talk of, I think, 1 hour of just Ralf Rangnick. For me, this is like... So Ralf Rangnick was talking in that talk, and although I watched it probably 3-4 years ago, I still remember one thing that he says, and he says it so clearly, that when you take over any football club, there are 3 things that you don't change. First, it was you don't change the name of the club. So that's a big no-no. Second, I think, I'm not sure it's so accurate, but it was in this domain. Second was something that has to do with the color and the badge of the club. So you don't mess with the logo, and you don't mess with the colors. And we all know what happened to the Malaysian guy, the Thai guy, I think, that owned Cardiff. Basically, Cardiff used to be known as the Bluebirds, I think, and he turned them into dragons, and they became red, and it was a mess.
Okay.
And then I think something that has to do with the stadium. So he basically, I'm not sure, I'm sorry, Ralph, if I said are not accurate, but it was in this domain. So what the point here is that there are 3 things. These are 3 things that you should stick to, and then you can change everything else you want. It doesn't matter. because club fans will stick to you. And the guy knows what he's doing because he took over clubs and he made some big changes. And they are now one of the biggest and most successful teams in their leagues and in their continents. Some would argue, oh yeah, but he changed Leipzig. He wasn't used to be Red Bull Leipzig, da 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 da.
Yeah, I remember that being an issue to the fans.
Yeah, because even the ownership of the club is different than every other single German club. But it wasn't Rolf's decision to change that. He was brought in to change people's perception of that.
Okay.
So Red Bull took over and they hired him.
Yeah.
So although a lot of people were against that, he managed to win them over. And now the club has big following. It's a small town. So, so there are things that you don't mess with in any football organization. And Juventus made this bold move to modernize their approach to. They kind of wanted to put themselves ahead of the game, and they've seen the importance of marketing and branding, and they wanted to approach something before it even becomes a necessity.
Exactly.
It can, as you said, it makes you in this awkward place where you don't know what to, how to feel about it. I'll give you an example. Chelsea, I support Chelsea. And a lot of people tell me, yeah, you stand for a lot of good things, but you support Chelsea. And I get it. I have no issues with anything that people throw at me because I have this good sportsmanship that I enjoy a conversation. And the thing about Chelsea is that what makes them successful in building their narrative is that they've never abandoned their history. They don't deny that they have a short trophy-based history, but they are so connected to their story as a football club. Especially, look at the case of Stamford Bridge and when they wanted to move away from Stamford Bridge to a different stadium. Just follow that story and you'll see how proud the Chelsea supporters are of their own heritage. They don't fight it. Actually, the latest campaign for their kit launch was, I think, the latest or the one before. The motto was, it's a Chelsea thing. So a Chelsea thing represents an ideology, represents the area of Chelsea, represents what the people of Chelsea or of London or West London think about or feel about. So these are narratives. That's why we say it's a narrative. Because Liverpool, for example, have been far, far, far away from winning trophies for so long. But instead of losing fandom, they actually keep on adding fans year after the other because of the narrative of the sleeping giant. United haven't been successful for a lot of many years before Sir Alex. And then after the Busby Boys and Sir Alex, it's a different, and they use the story of Busby Boys as a catalyst for change. So, believe it or not, organizations are unique in their own narrative, but they're not unique in their trophy cabinets because after 50 years, somebody might catch up with Real Madrid or with Liverpool. And and then when we get there, we will look at history as the whole package, not just that the fact that Madrid was dominant for 50 years or whatever. So history can be changed if it's based on a trophy, but you can never lose your history if it's based on your own identity, which is your own cultural aspect. One last example about football clubs. I want you to further investigate one of my most interesting football clubs right now, which is Brentford. So Brentford is in the Championship in England.
Brentford?
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically Brentford is owned by, I'm not sure about the name of the guy, but he was a gambler that supports Brentford. And then he won the lottery one day and he decided to buy has the club that he supports. And
Okay.
after that, he went on and he bought another club in Denmark. I think Denmark. Yeah, it's called Midland. I'm not sure about pronunciation. But anyway, so he hired Rasmus Ankersen, which is one of the brightest thinkers in the game, and he has this book of the Golden Mine Effect, which I highly recommend you to read. So Rasmus Ankersen, with the club owner, decided to do things differently and to break the status quo, that things should be done in this way for any football club. And instead of doing that, he said that this is a David versus Goliath fight, and if David uses the same force that Goliath is using, then he will never. So we have to come up with our own strength, and that comes in as their bravery to try and experiment new things. So one of the, I'm not saying it's a good thing, but it's something that they've done.
Okay.
Brentford closed down their academy. They don't have a youth. They don't have youth. And they said instead of spending 2 million, I think, investing in the academy players, and then the academy players would leave anyways to Chelsea, United, Liverpool, or whatever, we decided to do things in a different way. We will use this money to invest in other areas and departments. And now what they're trying to do is that they go and hire rejects. So if you are a United reject, they will go and hire you, and you become a Brentford player.
Oh, this is a really good story.
Yeah, it's a smart way to do that, because Rasmus Ankersen sat down with a lot of good thinkers in the game or in sports. And I think he took a lot of inspirations from Francis, the Jamaican sprinter coach that hires people based on their drive for a second chance. So Brentford is one of the most interesting clubs in the world, because now they're pushing to a playoff.
So exciting.
They're getting there every year, but they're not there. But I think in a couple of years they will. Also, the other club, Midland, is also run by the same guys, and they, at one point, I think 6-7 years ago or 5, they were the team that scored the most set pieces in the world. They managed to be, they were more efficient in their set piece delivery than Atletico Madrid, which was a very, like a benchmark. Why? Because they did things differently. They're not afraid to try new things. And that's the strength of the club. So in short, be brave enough to break the wheel and to try to do things that will set you apart, just like Green Forest Rovers that you spoke about.
Yeah, I was just thinking about them.
This is an earth. They realize we will probably never gonna outbeat United or Liverpool, in the sense of that we'll never be more successful than them in the trophy race, but we can bring in more fandom using a different story. So if you're David, you have to think different weapon.
Yes, and therefore, Abdullah, more money, and more money means you get to spend on more players, which means then eventually you will get to those teams and you will be winning as many trophies as they would be. And in fact, it's possible that they even surpass them. And I wonder if this is what Juventus was looking at, is, we need a completely new narrative here, because I can see that a team like Black Forest in 30 years' time, I would rather visit Black Forest's all wooden stadium and have their vegan food and support their team with their bamboo charcoal. Sorry?
It sounds to me like a perfectly fit hipster club for hipsters.
I mean, in some sense, yeah. So, they'll get my support, whether it was from my living room or to go spend there. So I think I think it's very interesting, these different narratives clubs are using, honestly.
Yeah, all joking aside, I think it's a brilliant idea, and it's something that no one probably had the bravery to try.
Yeah.
And one of the most uh, inspiring stories about club narratives is also Atletico Bilbao. So Bilbao, um, you know their rule. It's a silver. They impose this rule upon themselves by themselves to only hire or recruit players from their region, Albas,
Yes.
and it's they can change it anytime, but they
Mhm.
don't because it's their
Yeah.
identity. So there was this survey passed to the Bilbao's supporters because the board was thinking of abandoning this rule, and they asked them, would you rather see the team wins, or would you rather see us competing with dignity using our own identity? And it was incredible how the majority, and
Yeah.
like a big difference between the people that said yes and no, because the majority of people said no, we would rather lose but see
Mhm.
the team try to compete with dignity using our own identity.
Mhm.
And believe it or not, they're one of the teams that haven't dropped to the lower leagues, and they've almost won the Europa League, they've almost won
Yeah.
the, the Copa del Rey. So winning trophies is not and should not be the principle that guides you for following your team. Because if that was the principle, then every year we'll have a different team. And if that was the principle, then Liverpool wouldn't exist. And if that was the principle, then you abandoned the process and you focused on the outcome. And when you do that, you become more anxious, you become more frustrated, you become more stressed,
Yeah.
you become
Yeah.
more fragile.
Abdul, it sounds like even just running a business too, though. I mean, football clubs are businesses as well, but when when you're mentioning anxious and restless, this is when there's a lack of vision in maybe your life
Yes.
or in the business that you run or God, whatever, even with your like homework, if you don't have a vision and a real reason why you're doing something, you're going to be anxious and restless and um, spend impulsively as well.
Yes, I agree. And I think that currently the way we view football limits our appreciation to the game and limits our discussion about the game because we're basing everything on a binary platform where a win equals excellence and a loss
Yes.
equals mess. And
Mhm.
it's not nearly it's not even remotely close to the reality.
Amazing. So basically, in conclusion, it doesn't matter what style you're going with, it matters that you do have a narrative.
Yes, and you can be the. I don't want people to get me wrong. I'm not saying that the Barcelona way or the positive football style is the way. I'm saying that a culture that is based
Exactly.
high sustainable performance is the way, and embracing your identity is the way. You can be Atletico Madrid and you can be seen as this uh, devil in the movie or in the series or in the narrative that you're the bad guys, but the Atletico Madrid supporters enjoy this narrative because it represents
Mhm.
themselves and represents this underdog identity. And I bet you that very, very, very few football clubs can replicate that style of play. Even Simeone himself, I would say, he would struggle to copy that style of play to exactly as he's doing right now, because he managed to build in this narrative in Atletico Madrid.
Mhm.
And in my head, it's very difficult for him to build the same narrative for modern footballers again, unless he goes to a football club that has no narrative, and then he builds on that narrative and he put them up again. So
Mhm.
he went there to Atletico Madrid and they were struggling. He put on this ideology. he won, he conquered, and he has the support no matter what happens to him or to the team. So my point is, to conclude, you can have all sorts of narratives, but make sure that it's not a, it's not a negative narrative. When I say negative, I mean, you don't do horrible things to people. And if you are following the Corona, I don't want to talk about Corona, but likely of a relation. If you've been following the news, you've seen how different clubs are handling their staff, and if they are supporting them, if they are stopping their support, if they're blah 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 blah, and you can be so disappointed about your club, or you can be so proud of your club. And believe me, this is a very dangerous turning point for clubs that might lose some fandom because of their negative. That's what I mean with negative, because of their negative actions or measures that they've took. So some clubs have to be very proud of themselves, and some fans have to be very proud of their clubs, but others have a lot of justifying and explaining to do, which tells you everything you need to know about the power of narrative opposed to the power of trophies.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, I think that concludes it. That was amazing. Honestly, like I've learned so much here, and you've clarified for me how Barcelona works, and you've shed light on some new teams that are taking an alternative narrative that we're not used to succeed, and to hear that they're actually doing well with it is fantastic to hear. Yeah, so thank you very much for joining us. And I hope that you will join us again with other stories, because I know you and I have some interesting questions. I do want to ask you a bit about why players stay in the game and why some leave. But that is for another time. That is something to tease, I guess, our viewers with. Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to?
Point, you sorry, I interrupted you, but you said,
no, go for it.
Yes, this is not scripted, but you have said something about the next topic, and incidentally, on my other page, Sharing Corner, where I share daily articles that is related to the game, I'm sharing an article today about why kids abandon organized sports, and it might have some of the answers, but not all the answers, but some of it is
I'm sure it will. I'm sure it will.
I'm sure you will enjoy. And by the way, I did some research and I've done my homework, and I have Del Piero here.
Very nice, thank you.
1998 World Cup, which is my favorite World Cup.
Who is that? Who is he sitting in front of? I can't. Is it Vieri?
Yeah, I think Di Baggio, but I can't see it properly. But yeah. So thank you again. I'm honored. I'm sorry it took so long. It's almost like an hour.
No, as long as it's fun, and I'm sure others would enjoy it. I mean, that was super informative for me.
Thank you again, and I wish you all the best in your pursuit of driving change within the game. And I'm sure that with your energy and commitment and enthusiasm and kindness, you will achieve that. And if anything, I'm always here, and I'm always ready to support. Thank you everyone for listening, and I hope it wasn't boring. And I wish you a happy Ramadan.
Thank you.